Okay, so today we're diving into something that's at the very heart of American presidential politics, the electoral map itself. Because, based on some really interesting new population projections, it looks like the ground is literally shifting under our feet. The old familiar paths to the White House, they might not work for much longer. Let's get into it. So, let me start with a big question, one that's probably keeping a lot of political strategists up at night. Just imagine it's 2032. Your candidate does everything right. They win those classic Rust Belt battlegrounds that we've all been told, for decades, are the key to everything. But what if that's just not enough anymore? Well, this is the nightmare scenario for Democrats that's starting to emerge from the data. The projections show that even if a Democratic candidate sweeps the entire blue wall, we're talking Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, they could still fall short of those magic 270 electoral votes. Even adding a state like Nevada wouldn't be enough to put them over the top. So you have to ask, how is this even possible? Well, it's not about changing voters' minds, it's about people literally moving around the country. And this whole process is driven by something called reapportionment, which basically redraws the entire electoral map every 10 years. It's a pretty straightforward three-step dance. First, the big one. The census comes along and counts everybody in the country. Then, based on where the population has grown or maybe even shrunk, the 435 seats in the House of Representatives get reshuffled among the states. And finally, and this is the key part, a state's electoral vote count is just its House seats plus its 2 senators. So those changes directly reshape the Electoral College. And the results of all this? Well, you end up with a map that is very clearly tilting in one direction. You see, people aren't moving evenly across the country, and that creates some really clear winners and losers when it comes to raw political power. And right here, you can see that trend in black and white. The states that are projected to gain electoral votes, they're mostly in the fast-growing South and the West. Think Texas, Florida, Arizona. And meanwhile, the states that are set to lose votes are concentrated up in the Northeast and the Midwest. We're talking traditional powerhouses like California, New York, and Pennsylvania. You know, what's really striking when you look at these numbers is just the scale of the change. We're not talking about a little tweak here or there. Texas and Florida, just between the two of them, are projected to gain 5 electoral votes. At the very same time, California and Illinois are on track to lose 5. Just think about that. That's a 10-vote swing just among those 4 states alone. All right, let's just quickly zero in on the biggest movers. Leading the pack is Texas, which is projected to add a whopping 3 electoral votes. That would give it a massive total of 43. Then you've got Florida, expected to gain 2 more, making it an even more critical presidential prize with 32 electoral votes. And on the flip side, you have California. It's projected to lose 3, which, shrinks its relative power in the Electoral College quite a bit. So a demographic reality like this forces a huge strategic rethink for both parties, right? For Republicans, the challenge is holding on to their grip in these growing states that could actually become more competitive. But the most immediate, intense pressure, as the source material really highlights, seems to fall on the Democratic Party. They're facing a map that's just becoming structurally harder to win based on their traditional playbook. And hey, this isn't some fringe theory cooked up by political junkies. This is being talked about at the very highest levels of the party. The Democratic National Committee chairman himself, Ken Martin, has said point blank that the party needs to start investing in these traditionally red states right now if they want to build a path to victory in the future. But here's the kicker. This big strategic pivot is happening at what might be the worst possible time. The party isn't just dealing with these scary census projections. They're also wrestling with the fallout from 2024, which includes fundraising problems, big questions about leadership, and even declining voter registration. It's really a perfect storm of challenges. So what does this actually look like on the ground? How do you even begin to compete in deep red territory? Well, a recent governor's race down in Mississippi gives us a really fascinating and maybe a little bit cautionary tale. So back in 2023, the Democrats had this candidate, Brandon Presley, who, fun fact, is a cousin of Elvis Presley, believe it or not. Anyway, he was seen as having a real legitimate shot against a pretty unpopular Republican governor. It was basically the perfect test case for this new kind of Southern strategy. But the whole effort ended up revealing this huge disconnect. You have Mississippi's only Democratic congressman, Benny Thompson, who said the National Party never even bothered to call him for advice. He slammed them for parachuting in these national consultants who just didn't get the local politics. And that's a complaint you hear a lot from state-level folks. And the result? Well, Presley lost. But, and this is a huge but, he lost by just 3 percentage points. I mean, an incredibly close margin. The whole race became this perfect symbol of both the tantalizing potential for Democrats in these states and the immense frustration when it feels like that opportunity gets squandered. Okay, now it's super important here to take a step back for a second. While these population trends are really powerful, we are talking about projections. We're not talking about prophecies. The future is definitely not written in stone. A whole lot could change, actually. Some huge economic event or even a natural disaster could totally shift where people are living. We're also seeing these political realignments happening, like shifts among Latino voters, that could scramble the entire map as we know it. And you've got to remember, building political power takes time. I mean, it took Democrats more than a decade of hard, sustained work to finally make Georgia competitive. And that leaves us with this final thought to chew on. As the very foundation of the electoral map begins to tilt, the political parties are facing a pretty stark reality. Is trying to compete on this new, much more difficult terrain simply an option they can think about, or has it become an absolute unavoidable necessity for their very survival?